All right, here we go.
What's good, everybody? I'm Robert Dickens Jr.
This is Ryan Reed.
This is Elanders Frazier.
This is John Gaal, and you're listening to Volta.
Changing the conversation
For percussion educators,
Designers,
And performers.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to another podcast of Volta Percussion. Thanks for being here, everyone. We got Ryan Reed, Elanders Frazier, Robert Dickens Jr., of course, myself, Mr. John Gaal. We're talking tonight about what? I don't remember. Guys, help me out. Happens every time.
Tonight we're talking about reaching your audience. Does the message actually get where it's going? Does the message actually get where it's going?
We'll probably delete what I'm about to say next, but really the title of the tonight's podcast is "What do you do with them?" We may leave that in there.
Leave it out.
You'll have to listen more. Okay.
we won't leave that in there.
Keeping it real with John Gaal.
Already gone. It's already gone.
And starting from here.
Maybe we call it teaching methods for thick skulls.
I like that. That's a little bit more PG than what I said.
I feel like it's really centered around maybe students that don't have musical sense. I don't know if have y'all heard that term before? Like musical sense?
Yes. My question is, what do we do with those students? Because I, for one, feel like if you don't have a certain
Panache.
basic, yes. If you don't have that, like you don't have to be a musician or a percussionist. Like it's okay to say that, like, you know what? I'm not good at baseball. I'm gonna go do this. Like that's okay.
But what if you really want to play baseball though?
Then you just gotta figure it out. That's what you gotta do. If you love doing it, then you'll figure it out. You'll take the time to figure it out if you really like it. But I don't know. I find it hard to believe that if a person's really putting in a lot of energy because they really like it, if they're being told to do the right things and they're doing the right things, they're gonna get better.
I feel like we okay, so I think about it like two different ways. Like I feel like we have the students that are naturally talented. Like we love some of those students because some students are naturally talented, but they don't want to foster that talent in any way, shape, or form. They just, I'm good at it, but I ain't got to do anything about it. Then we have the students that are naturally talented that love to do it all the time. Those students are great because they practice all the time and they're fantastic to be around. Then we have the students that love to do it all the time, but maybe they don't have a lot of the natural talent. I feel like that's me. Like I love to do it all the time, but I never came with the natural talent. I just had to do it all the time and just kept getting better because I just love to do it all the time. So, you get better by doing it all the time. So you start getting better at it naturally because you do it all the time. And then you have the students that maybe don't do it as much, but don't have the natural talent. And I feel like that's where this conversation comes in, is maybe the kid likes the idea of it, but they don't really they're not completely invested in it, all the way. How do we I feel like the frame of reference sometimes is, how do we drive the investment to get them to invest more time into it so that they can start to, I guess, reap those dividends of the amount of time and effort to put into it to start getting better by initiating more time? Because kind of to your point, if we say that the more time and effort that you put into something, you will gain some level of, proficiency at it in some capacity. It may not be the same capacity that student A, student B, student C, student D is going to get, but it's going to be some level of proficiency at it. You know what I mean? But how do we engage students to a point, or how do we engage anyone to a point? So if we're talking about, performers, designers, etc., how do we get any level of engagement that gets us to a point to where we have a general sense of liking something, but I want to get myself to a point to where I now want to engage with something to where I want to dedicate more time to it? How do we drive that engagement?
I think it first starts with awareness. I think what is difficult from a teaching standpoint, from some students, that it is difficult for them to figure out how to get better, or students that seem to be stuck and their progress seems really slow. I feel like the first thing is awareness. Not just necessarily awareness of how good they are, but awareness of all the things that they need to overcome to be able to get to where they want to be. And they have to know themselves well enough to know how much time that's going to take. Now, you mentioned talent earlier. Those of us that are more or less talented, I would say that most times more talented students tend to be a little bit lazier, just because sometimes things come a little bit easier. I think students that fall somewhere in the middle, where they have like a basic talent, but they are just curious about it, I feel like those students will definitely practice. And the students that are very into it and they maybe don't have the natural talent, they will definitely start to excel too, because they're going to be more consistent. But I feel like what I see that happens a lot from the education standpoint with some students, is it takes them so long to realize, oh, I'm a lot further away from what I'm trying to attain than I realize. Oh, this is going to take a lot more time for me. You know what I mean? Like, I can't expect that it's, watching videos of John Gaal play, green at 200, that it's going to take me like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do that in 5 minutes. No big deal. It's like, no, that's not going to happen that fast for you, bro. You're not John Gaal. That's not going to happen. You know what I mean? But like,
they don't realize which student they are in the example. I see what you're saying.
Am I the super talented student that things come to me easily? Am I the student that's averagely talented, but I just need to continue to work? Am I the student that maybe I have below average skills just because maybe I don't know as much, or I don't have as much experience? I just got here in 9th grade. Then like, oh, okay, I just need to work my butt off. Or are you a student that things come very slowly for me? In that case, I feel like if you're that level of a student or a designer or performer, you need to know that yourself. And you need to be very systematic about how you're going to get better, because it may take you longer than most people for those things to click. And I will say, for those particular people, I feel like on average, if it does take longer for those people for it to click, usually when they get it, like they got it and it's solid consistently. But you have to know yourself well enough to know, okay, the audition's in like 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I can still only do this amount of things. I'm still only approaching these amount of tempos. Where do I feel that I am with my own just talent level?
The bigger question is, what do you do when somebody is, like their learning curve is a little bit slower, but they don't realize it? Because I've had a couple students where they practice a lot, but it's like never the right stuff, and their quote unquote vocabulary goes up, but to the awareness conversation, be aware of how good you are at something, not just aware of how many things you know, but how good you are at each thing. And when the awareness is not there and the learning curve is very, very slow, how do you either have that conversation with that student to be like, hey, like your goal is to make the snare line, and right now, if we're here, you're 3 states away. You know?
I see what you're saying. So you're almost speaking to a point of like, you're learning a bunch of words, but you've still yet to build a sentence. Like,
well, yeah, and you're missing the fundamentals to build that sentence. Like, you know, I can play everything, but it's all, you know, what I call dog paw hands, where it just flops around and everything. Like, you can do things, but if you get asked to play it next to anybody else, you can't do those things with other people. So,
that's tough, man. Like, it's tough because for an individual like that, I've had situations in a private lesson where you feel like you're making headway with that student individually, but as soon as that individual gets in a line situation, they revert back to what feels normal to them when they're in a crowd. And you're like, that's not what we were doing in the lesson. What is that? And they're like, I don't know. You're like, don't do that. Do what we were doing in the lesson. And like, okay, cut. What are you doing? Like, we're like, that's not what we were doing in the lesson. Like, I don't know. My hands are just freaking out right now. Like, why are your hands freaking out right now? Like, just do what we were doing in the lessons. Like, why are you doing something different right now? I literally have had this exact problem where I saw progress being made on a one-on-one situation, but as soon as it was with a bass drummer, but as soon as we got inside of the room where we were inside of the audition room with like the full battery, it was like, I don't know if it was the attention span with everyone being around, and it was because we were not in a quiet room with just me and him and one-on-one and me talking and going with the music and everything. But it was just like, everything just kind of like, what happened with, we had great wrist turn. We were getting the sound out. Like, we were getting the notes out. Like, we were getting the doubles out. Like, where'd it go? I was hyping, like, it's all gone now. Like, now we're just playing on top of just, like, it's gone. Like, the feet are everywhere now. Like, where is it? Where was it at? And I, like, the parents were frustrated too, because when we started the lesson program, the parents were like, he really enjoys it. He's really frustrated because he wants to get better, but he doesn't know how to get better. And we feel like the lessons will help him get to a point to where he'll get better. And he wants to be a part of it. You know, he wants to, you know, stay in it for the social reasons, et cetera, et cetera. But he also doesn't want to be the weakest member of the link, you know, to that extent. And I feel like when you have the parental engagement in that frame of reference, like, you feel like everybody's involved in the success. That's rare sometimes. A lot of the times the parents aren't engaged in that level of the success story. You know what I mean? Where they want, like, I want the student to be as successful as the student wants to be successful. You know what I mean? So it was very different that it didn't like translate when we got back to the full room, because I was like, I don't know I got to a point to where I was like, I don't know what else to tell. Like, I don't know what else to tell you to make it different for you, because it's not like I can't put you in a situation where everybody's not here so that you can be successful. This is the only, like, you have to be in a room with everybody else to play. Like, you have to be able to tune your mind into what you're doing on your drum while you're playing. And I don't know what that feels like for you, but you've got to be able to lock that in. He did not end up making the baseline that year, needless to say, because he could not make it through the audition process. I ended up casting. We were talking about casting earlier. I ended up casting a different individual. She was marginally better than him, but not that much better, but she was better. He went back to the front ensemble, but I felt bad for him because I felt like we made progress in the individual lessons. It's just he could not handle the situation of being with the remainder of the group. And I didn't know how to really drive. I didn't really know how to separate the information for him to pick it up in that level. I feel like as an instructor, that's a deficiency. I don't know what y'all are saying, like you can't help it, but I feel like that's how do you? There's got to be a way to explain it. There's got to be. Someone has had to have had this conversation before.
John, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I just say that's an undercurrent of immaturity and lack of focus. And so to overcome that is you can do that a number of ways. Number one, I believe the instructor can provide additional resources for the student to succeed, such as play-along tracks, video play-alongs, whatever. Number two, I think in that situation, because that kid is so immature / young, really, it just comes down to a mindset, is the next step is instead of throwing them into the fire with full ensemble, even though that's what needs to happen because you're the instructor and you need to make sure that you're running the rehearsal full drumline or percussion-wise, the next step for that kid would have probably just been a sectional with that line. And then third step probably would be teaming it up with a more mature individual in the battery or, again, percussion ensemble section that they can drum with either of the same instrument or of a separate instrument, so that that individual, that young kid, can start learning how their part lines up with different timbres to work on that focus issue. And then finally, the fourth step would be to throw them into the fire and you just gotta do it. And they'll probably burn and not make it the first year, and that's okay, because that's a learning thing that they just have to overcome. But I think if you take those with everything that you were doing, plus the additional scaffolding steps to help them out, it probably just takes time. And it sucks, but suck it up.
I agree. I mean, I think that we have to be careful as the open-hearted teachers and educators that we are, that we don't take everything as our fault. And I feel I've been in that situation, and I won't go any further than that, but I've been in that situation before. I felt bad because all my students know that that any student that I give private lessons to, I'm a big bullet list person. So I'm going to give them a bullet pointed of like, hey, on 8s, you need to work on this, and this. Technique things, you need to work on this, and this. This exercise, you need to fix this, and this. If I send you that every single week and I'm helping you work on it, and now you have all the answers in front of you, I cannot hold myself responsible for using the information for you. And I think that as educators, sometimes because we do care, we're looking at the student that doesn't get it, but we're sometimes forgetting if you have 6 kids that you're giving lessons to, 5 of those kids got exactly what you told them to do. And they figured out how to do it. That one kid is not your issue, and it's not necessarily your fault, because I've found in particular, if any student is willing to commit to doing what I tell them to do consistently, they always get it. Point blank, period. Unless they're just like arrhythmic and their body just ain't jiving with playing rhythms. It's just like, hey, I just can't do that. Walking and chewing gum, I can't do it. I mean, patting my head and rubbing stuff, I can't do it. Like, if you can do the things that I'm telling you to do, you'll be fine. These are all very basic things. It's not that hard. And music, in particular, percussion, is not that difficult to explain. It's very simple, right? But at the end of the day, if students are unwilling to put in the time, there is no amount of information that we can give them that will allow them to be able to overcome that. And they understand it in academics, they understand it in sports. Why can't they understand it in music? You didn't make the basketball team because, yes, you know how to shoot a jump shot, but you're supposed to make 200 a day. You'd probably practice maybe once or twice because you're taking AP this and this and this and that and this. Like, that's not my fault as an educator. And that's not your fault as an educator either, because we're also crippling the student because we're not giving them their own responsibility. Like, we can't drum for you. I can't get your inner beats down for you. I can't grip the stick the correct way for you. Like, I can't do that.
Yeah, the other thing we have to remember as educators, and I'm super guilty of this, is not every kid trying to get to the same level. You know, especially in the full band setting. Like, we have to recognize that there are some kids that just do band for the social outlet, whether it's because they want to be with their friends or they're trying to get away from a less than stellar outside of school life or whatever. And I think the biggest thing we can do to help those students receive the message is put them in a position where they can experience some level of success, and maybe they will catch fire because of that. But I have been guilty of trying to treat them the same way as the students that are super driven. And that has always burned me and burned them in the process, because I end up being hard on them, or they don't want to be pushed or whatever. And there's nothing, those kids are still great. They're not bad kids because of that. But I think sometimes we get so wrapped up in our message that we can give them versus the message they need.
Well, then,
which
question:
is not the same for every kid.
Devil's advocate, how do you maintain a consistent level of excellence if you're going to keep fluctuating that standard for every kid?
I think you have to, the standard of excellence has to, students have to be able to be excellent on their level. They have to be able to be given, we as educators have to give them an appropriate level of musical and performance responsibility. You know, there are students that I have that have different needs. I have had the privilege of working with some of the coolest students that are special needs students. Some of them can play basic parts. Some of them cannot play basic parts. Some of them can be left on a part by themselves. Some of them can play the part if I play the part with them. I have to give them the appropriate level of excellence, because excellence isn't a one size fits all. You know what I mean? If there's a student that their best thing is, hey, this student is not, you know, they have some motor functions or something like that, like they have other challenges, but they can keep quarter notes and they can do that consistently throughout a piece of music. That is absolutely excellent for that student. Is that excellent for the average of students? I wouldn't say so, because most students are able to do more than that. But I think that we as educators have to jump in there and kind of help define what is excellence based on what this student is able to accomplish reasonably.
Well, then what happens if they want to play a certain instrument on your drum line?
Then they have to understand that, hey, this is the level of responsibility for this particular instrument.
But doesn't that negate what you and Ryan just said about creating a standard of excellence for that specific kid? Now you're equating your own standard for that specific instrument.
Right. The standard of excellence is on the music and what's already set there within itself. So for instance, if a student wanted to, let's say, obviously all the instruments play music, but they don't all serve the same function. So if a student wants to, let's say they want to play the snare drum, well, these are the type of rhythms and things that you need to be able to do to be proficient enough to be placed on this particular instrument. Now, in some way, shape, form, and fashion, we can find a level of excellence where you can still be a part of the ensemble, but maybe you're not able to handle this particular level as of right now. But this is the standard that needs to be in place so that you can actually achieve that, so that they earn that particular spot. I'm not saying that every student is going to achieve the same level of excellence, but I do believe that there are certain qualifications that students should meet to be able to be in certain positions within your ensemble. Now, you get to decide that as an instructor, but that's just the reality of it. Everyone has different challenges and different things that they're fighting against, but even though everyone is treated fairly, we can't treat all students equally. That might be a lot to chew on. Everyone can have the same opportunity, but we can't guarantee every person that they can have the exact same outcome, because that's just not realistic. That's not even how the world works in general.
It's the reason why different parts exist for all the wind instruments. There's first trumpet, second trumpet, third trumpet. It's the same reason we have marimbas and vibraphones and racks and snare drums and flub lines or tom lines, whatever you want to call them, so that we can place students in a position where they can get the information they need to achieve their ultimate goal. But it might not be realistic for them to achieve their ultimate goal or their ultimate position right away, for the same reason that we don't hold freshmen and seniors to the same standard. Otherwise, every kid would be in the top band or the bottom band if you have bands, like multiple concert bands. So either everyone's in the top or everyone's in the bottom. We got to split them based on ability, and they might not like what they're hearing, but we also don't have the same expectations. Like my high school has 3 different concerts. The amount of growth every student should experience relative to the same, but what
Can you say that again one more time, Ryan? We lost you there right on that last thing you said.
Sorry, I think it's starting to snow here, so my internet's cutting in and out. But I think it's snowing in April. It's not like we have to put them in a position to grow, but what they grow with will depend on their ability, not how much they grow. That's a starting position. Growth is a starting position, and go down the street. How far? As far as you can go. And this is a conversation that we're having in our band program right now. With our youngest concert band, the goal isn't to play at conference or play at Midwest. It's start and go as far as you can. Our top group is start here, play at conference, or play at contest, or there's a measurable thing. So they are different expectations, but that's based on where the kid currently is, or where the student currently is.
I want to say, speaking back to our topic, I think regardless of where your student is on their journey, because every student is going to be subject to, different levels, depending upon where they are. I think ultimately, if I'm looking at it from a designer's perspective, because I've had special needs students before, and you have to get creative as a designer as well. when you're looking at creating a program, especially if you have multiple students inside of your program, to make sure that, everybody can participate in a certain frame of reference. So as a designer, when you're talking about reaching your audience and making sure that your show is designed appropriately and effectively, so that the music still fits and everybody can still participate, and the music isn't a shell of what it could be for the sake of participation, but it's still written well, it's still written accurately, all the parts are still served, justice, and you don't have a I don't know, I've always heard the what's the I hate it when people say rubber cowbell. I've heard rubber cowbell before. I've heard cowbell before. I've heard triangle before. It's like, why do you have a triangle in just a random marching band show? Like, most marching band shows don't even have triangles in them, because it's just such a pointed sound that doesn't even belong. But I feel like when you're trying to make sure that your message is being sent out appropriately as a designer, you have to get creative in terms of how you characterize that show, whether it's thinking differently about how you go about arranging the parts, thinking about different ways to write inside and outside of different tempos, etc. I'll kind of tell you guys a story about a student of mine that I had I think it's probably like my first, what year was it? First 5 years of teaching. Great kid. He was on the I'd say the lower end of musical sense. Funny kid to be around. He had natural rhythm. I'll say he loved to dance. He would come into the band room, loved to dance. But in terms of being able to understand rhythmically what was going on the page, he could not memorize rhythms. So that was one functionality of being able to read music that I could not convey with him, no matter how much we worked on it. We worked on it a lot, trying to get him to be able to read music. So when we talk about reading a 7-minute marching band show, I couldn't get him to read music. And this was a 9th grader. And I was working with the band director, and I was like, okay, he's been through 3 years of middle school band, and he cannot get through all of the music. No. And it didn't matter what I did. We read, and I had him on the 5th bass part, and we'd come back in rehearsal the next day. And I say, where we at? And he said, measure 6. Okay. What's in measure 6? I don't know. Like, all right. So I got creative, and what I would do is I would teach him the parts as we went. And the good thing about him was he had so much rhythm, he could memorize the parts as we went through the show. So what we started doing as a battery is we played through the show, and he would memorize the parts as we learned the show. And as we learned the show, we did it chunk by chunk. He would memorize the segments. And what I started doing is when I came back into rehearsal, I started rewriting the parts that would make it easier for him to memorize as we went through the show, so that he can memorize the beats as we learned the show, chunking it through the music. So by the time we learned the show, he had it. He had it memorized because he could sing it, he could groove to it, he could dance to it. So by the time we got to competition, this is a competition band, mind you. So by the time we got to competition season, everything did sound kind of like it had a little, groove to it. But and the band director was like, that bass line is really grooving this year. I was like, I know. I was like, but it's good. He's like, He said, "It really sure came around this year." I was like, "I know he did," and he stayed in band. I think I was only at the school, I think, for another 2 or 3 years, but he stayed in band the entire time I was there, and he had a blast. He loved being in band, loved being around his friends and everything like that. And and it was so funny because he absolutely adored everything about it, and he marched really well. But that was just the one thing, is he couldn't memorize the notes on the page. So I had to get creative in terms of being able to figure out how to get him to memorize the music as we went. And I had to essentially write the music around him to him, and think about him. So I feel like from that messaging standpoint, that was like from a designer's way of thinking about how that message had to change. Like, it's not the most conventional way that a designer does things. Sometimes it's just like, you will read what's on the page, and if you can't, you figure it out. You got to go do something else, or you find another student to replace that student. And like, there was not another student that would hit that drum with the amount of velocity that he could, because he hit the drum like nobody's business. Nobody could slam that drum on the unisons that I needed them to. He was like 6'1", 6'2". Like, I mean, he could carry the weight of the drum, had no issue. It was like a 26, 20. I don't know how big the drum was. It was like a 26-inch drum or something like that. He carried no issue or anything like that. And I was like, I need this kid on this drum. I was like, I got to figure it out. So I figured it out. It's like, it's one of those things in life where it's like, you just figure it out. You know what I mean? And we got creative, and he loved it. He had a blast, and we had a blast with those shows. But it's like, it's one of those things where, you have to get creative around what you're doing. And, I think to bring it way, way back to Rob's point, like at the beginning, once you have the awareness of what's going on, because I at first I didn't know that was the problem. I just thought that maybe he just wasn't, like, we talked about this earlier, like, I just thought he wasn't trying hard enough. Like, I treated like every other student. I was like, man, come on, like, you got to get it. Like, all these other kids are trying, and it's just one day we were just looking at it. I was just like, I just got down to the point, like, what's really going on? He was just like, he started tearing up a little bit. He's just like, I can't, I don't understand the notes on the page. I just can't read it. And I was just like, it took me back a little bit. I was like, man, like, I'm sorry, man. Like, I felt bad for blowing up on him like the week earlier. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like a bully at that point. I'm like big bad wolf, like coming down to the kid, not trying hard enough. It's just like, sometimes it doesn't click right away. You know what I mean? Sometimes it doesn't click. You know what I mean? Like, I get it. You know what I mean? But, it's,
I got a question. How do you tell the difference between a student who genuinely doesn't get it and a student who is just not putting in the time?
I could tell because with every rep that we did, I could look in his face and see the sincerity behind everything that he was doing. When you're looking at somebody in their eyes, when they're putting every single ounce of mental energy that they've got behind what they're trying to do. And I don't know if I ever really looked at him in his eyes, because I was in that school. It was just me and my sister. We were running the ensemble. She was teaching the front ensemble. I was teaching the battery. And it was a huge school. It was like 5 or 6 snares, 3 quads, 5 basses, and then it was like 9 or 10 kids in the front ensemble. It was a huge school. It was like a big, it was like 160 person band. It was a huge band. We did like a couple of competitions, but most of them were just like festivals. I don't even think it was competitions. It really was just festivals. But it was good time. But like I think I was so focused on what the entire battery was doing that I never like completely zoned in on him. It was always like I was looking at the entire baseline, and it was just like, excuse me, if you guys aren't like putting in the time, instructors like, if you guys aren't putting in the time to get these parts right, like we're not gonna make it. It's like I was doing what I would do with every other line that I would teach. You know what I mean? Not that I was really experienced in my career. I mean, I think I had been teaching at that point for maybe like 5 or 6 years. So it's not like I'm at year 18 like I am now. I would never make that mistake now. I would always go to every individual player now and see what's going on with them personally, individually, and because that's what you're supposed to do as an educator. I've learned a whole lot in my career. But as like a 5-6 year teacher, I'm just looking at the whole group, just thinking like, what's going on? Why can't you guys figure it out? And what's going on, But it's like he kept missing the same part over and over and over and over. And I was like, no person can be missing this same rhythm over and over again unless they just don't know what the rhythm is. And it was like figuring out that he just could not read the rhythm on the page, and then figuring out that even if when I played the rhythm back for him, he could play it for me. But when I tried to get him to read the rhythm from the page, he could not read the rhythm from the page. That was when it clicked for me, was that he couldn't decipher the notes that were written on the page. It was something about how the notes were written on the page and the spacing that did not click for him. And that was when I was like, I'm sure if that one measure was not clicking for him looking at 85 measures was probably stressing him the F out. You know what I mean? And especially with my black behind on the other side telling with a pair of sticks, clicking him saying, again, you know what I mean? Like that was not doing him any favors, you know what I mean? Yeah. And he's like 14 trying to like figure it out, you know what I mean? Like, and bless his heart, like, nobody wants to be in a position where they're trying to like, they're doing everything with what they have to try to, do the right thing. And it was my lack of understanding that was what needed clarification. And once I got the clarification of what we needed to do, which was I needed to show him what it was. And I still continue to show him the rhythms, because even as I started rewriting the parts, I rewrote the score, showed him what the part was, played it for him, made him connect with what was written on the page, and then made sure that as he memorized it, I connected it with him in hopes that it would start to connect some dots, along the way. Whether it did or not, I don't know for certain, but I tried my best to, you know what I mean? But that was the things that he struggled with, but, it's one of those things to where, like you said earlier, it's like, I didn't have that awareness at first. I just thought it was just another student that was just not really trying hard enough. And I think, that's some of those things to where it's like nowadays, like one tick, yeah, maybe you're not putting in enough. Same tick over again. Something's not right. Something's not jiving on an individual level. And it's something that we got to figure out individually. What is it that's causing that? Because if it's the same tick over and over again on an individual level, then it's something that's individualistic to that person, to their individual landscape that needs to be addressed. You know what I mean? So things that I would do differently going forward. We could do a whole podcast of things I do differently now. So
I definitely found myself in that
season 3.
That whole yelling at people and then be like, oh, you just don't understand what I just said for the last 10 minutes. Hey, let me come help you off to the side. Just in my office, and I'll help you tomorrow during lunch. All right. Sorry.
Right.
My bad. I think I got that from my high school band director though. My high school band director was definitely one of those people that would like flip off a lot. Be like, Dickens, what are you doing? So just like, and then somebody will be like, "Hey, Mr. Mack, you just told us to do X, Y, and Z." You're right. I'm sorry. Why are you making me yell at you? It's like, what? It's just like, okay. So yeah, sometimes you're right, E. Sometimes you have to take that step back and be like, okay, all right, you just clearly don't understand. Let me help you. Let me give you some extra assistance. And I think that also brings up a really good point about designing. Like at the end of the day, like we're designing musically to solve problems and issues. And ultimately, even if you aren't designing around, you're designing to make all the performers sound the best that they can and the ensemble to sound the best that they can. So you know that if your keyboards aren't good at inside mallet runs while they're playing four mallet stuff, then you're probably not going to write a whole bunch of that. You're going to write whatever makes them sound the best and look the best. So
drop the mallets. Oh no, we lose Rob. We losing everybody tonight.
Yikes. See, this is what I get for using school internet. Your internet connection is unstable. Thank you for letting me know that, Zoom.
Oh no.
Yeah.
At least Zoom's being polite. That's nice. Polite of it.
And the second one to take an L tonight is me and you both, Ryan. We both got frozen. It was like
This will be the episode to watch on YouTube.
It will be.
You right?
While John on Pandora.
John down in Disney. About to get on the Avatar.
Oh my God.
I think going along with the design comment, that you just made, Robert, I think too, we got to realize sometimes our job as a designer is to design for the growth of the students and not necessarily the product at the end of the year, because, depending on what there's only one winner. So the odds are not like, unless you know your group is slamming, the odds are not in your favor. So, don't put your eggs in that basket when you're designing of we're gonna win. Are the kids at a level that will allow your product to do that? And if not, start to design, especially if it's a program you're going to be at long term. Like the high school I'm at right now, I also design, the percussion stuff for. I don't ever design with an outcome in mind. I didn't design for this virtual season with a certain outcome in mind, other than I want the kids to learn what it's like to play really, really clean and really, really and really sound great. And that was the only thing I designed and taught with that goal in mind. And they just happened to sound really great at the end of the season, And then next year when we come into marching band, because we're a concert A group, when we put drums on again, it's not to set the world on fire with a snare drum, because we're not going to do it. So we're just going to design to get those kids, I'm going to design a way to get those kids to be better at snare drum or better at tenors or better at whatever they're on to get them to be better, And I will say this, because I went through this a little bit with marching band in the pandemic last year. We had a smaller ensemble. We had 7 in the front and 7 in the battery. I was like, well, we got to march this and this and this. Why? If our goal as designers and educators, really as educators, is to get the kids to grow, why do we have to limit ourselves to what we believe we have to do? Last year I marched 4 snares, 3 tenors, and that was the battery. It was the goal. Again, we were in a pandemic. Let's teach the kids to drum. And now we're going to be bigger this year. And I go, why do we have to march bass drums? If we're still young, why do we got to march bass drums? I can put tom-toms or surdos in the front ensemble for some booms. We got concert bass drums. Why can't I march snare drums, tenors, and a single tom or a flub or whatever you want to call it? And teach kids to like, hey, you still can't keep your accents and taps down. So this tom part is literally going to be 7 minutes of accents and taps.
You're not wrong.
But like
you can design whatever you want. There is no formula.
Right. And I will say to everybody, there is no are you marching snare, bass, tenor, drums, marimbas, vibraphones, xylophones on the sheet. Doesn't matter where you're at. It's not there. It's not there. Are you successful in what you're doing? Does it make musical sense? Now, somebody is going to say, you're not marching bass drums. Correct.
Instrumentation concerns.
Sounds a little thin in the battery.
Little thin in the battery. little thin in the landscape of the battery ensemble. Your lower
Listen, all the
voices.
Now that everybody's judging either at the front of the field or in the box, they're just saying that because they don't see it. They don't actually hear that thinness. Let's be real. It doesn't sound thin. They're just looking at it going, there's no bass drums. It's thin. Meanwhile, I got 14 tom-toms on the front sideline. That's thin? No, there's no bass drums. It's thin. But there's 14 tom-toms on that concert bass drum and an 808 sample. It's still thin? Oh, okay. Cool. Just because we're not marching bass drums.
I'm trying to remember the last time I heard a marching bass line overpower like a sub.
Ever.
Ever. It's always like, boom.
You know why?
Boo.
You know why? Because that drum can only go so loud, and I can push that mixer a lot farther.
Oh, man. Oh, that's hilarious. John, what you got for us, buddy?
I want to thank everyone for listening tonight, or this morning, or this afternoon, whatever time you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for hanging out with us, everyone. We got Ryan Reed. He's getting snowed in up in the north, Ohio. Pray for him. Send him some love. We got Mr. Robert Dickens Jr. in the south, the dirt south. ATL, baby. Got Wi-Fi issues, so speak to your congressmen, your senators. Improve the public schools. ATL. You got Elanders Frazier. Pensacola, Florida. No problems there.
I sense sarcasm in your voice.
And then
You're talking about Pensacola, man. They got the spicy chicken biscuit at Chick-fil-A.
And Godzilla, apparently. Don't forget.
It's also mentioned in Kong versus Godzilla.
That's right. Shout out.
Don't y'all have some kind of naval base or something?
We do have the Naval Air Station, Pensacola.
And y'all have an international airport.
And we have an international, world famous international airport.
smallest
Now
in the
flying to ...
Lies. Probably got like 3 gates.
We have 7, Rob. I find that disrespectful. And I will see you when I see you.
Oh, dude, I got about as many as Dothan does. So.
As always, y'all can find us on Instagram at Volta Percussion. If you have some topics that you would like us to discuss going forward, this is our last episode.
Of the season. It's a season wrap.
Season finale. Oh, sad.
Season 10, baby. We've been doing this 10 years.
wrap up for season 2. So if you have some stuff that you want to chit chat with us about going into next season, send us an email, voltapercussion@gmail.com. We would love to hear from y'all, especially during the off season. Gives us some stuff to chit chat about as we prepare for a new and improved version as such. So please reach out to us there. We thank you all once again from all over the world. We feel the love, definitely on Instagram, definitely through people that have been listening thus far. Over 500 and I don't know, however many downloads from all over the world. So it's been a treat. So we appreciate it. So
Namaste.
yes, we'll namaste. So without any further ado, we will see y'all around the way, and of course we'll light up social media on the way back. But I will say during the off season we'll be dropping some trailers now and then, some hot takes, maybe some outtakes. We got plenty of those, so you'll see them. They'll be coming. That'll be a treat. So we'll see y'all when we see y'all. Peace.
Bye.